Looks like we do.
In which case, I'd like to call the meeting to order as it is 9 o'clock, and I would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Good morning, everyone. Trustee Alexander.
Here.
Trustee Kane will not be joining us. Trustee Dobson.
Here.
And Trustee Ames, have you joined yet? Okay. Trustee McMahon.
Here.
Trustee Martin. Trustee Riley.
Here.
And I think I saw Didia. Trustee Singleburn.
Here. Yep.
Great. We're all set to start.
Okay, and I would remind participants to please keep your mic muted when you're not speaking, and that will improve the sound quality for everybody. And first item on the agenda is the faculty-initiated discussion, shared courses across the system. And to frame the discussion, Jeff is going to kick it off.
Thank you, Trustee McMahon. So we're happy to have several faculty with us on the call today for this session. So Trustee McMahon and I met during the Farmington board meeting last November to talk about a topic for this discussion. And the subject raised, one of them at any rate, was shared courses, or more broadly, universities that share academic programming versus those programs that are found on only one of our campuses. So that was the subject of discussion. We shared some data after that meeting with them. And then subsequent to that, an interest arose in also hearing an update from the Faculty Governance Council. So we have Lisa Leduc from UMPI with us here, representing board faculty representatives, along with William Otto from UMM. Jamie Marrera is here representing the Faculty Governance Council. And that's who's on my screen, my one screen here. So I'll turn it over to Lisa, William, and Jamie for their discussion. Thank you.
So we do have Matthew is here. I'm just trying to go between screens. Yes, thanks, Matthew. I know that Patrick from UMA could not make it, and neither could Ned from UMFK as far as faculty reps. Michael asked me for the Zoom link this morning, and I did send it to him. Michael, are you here yet? That's from UM. Okay. And also from the Faculty Governance Council, we have Cindy Dean from UMA. So I guess I first, just in full disclosure, everybody knows I'm pretty transparent. William and I spoke to both Jeff and Chair Riley right before Christmas break about the request for some information about how FGC works for the trustees for both this meeting. Oh, and Clyde's here too. Sorry, Clyde, I already spoke to you. I knew there was one other faculty rep I was missing. It's hard on 2 pages. So as I was saying, they were looking to hear about some FGC stuff, and William and I both serve on both, but we deferred to more veteran and/or leaderships on the FGC to really voice that. I do want to say my apologies to Clyde and Matthew and Michael, if he gets here, and Ned and Patrick, because it was right before the holidays, we did not reach out to our other faculty reps to let them know. So this is kind of a last minute notification to them that we're going to talk about FGC as well as the shared programming during this hour. So just to set the stage, I want you all to know that the other faculty reps other than William and I did not know that FGC was going to be also on the agenda this morning. But to start, I guess I used the word shared, and I was about to correct you. I don't know, shared to me sounds like they're working together, and that's not always the case. So the word that I came to mind was duplicate, but that's kind of pejorative. It sounds like it's a bad thing. So I don't really like that word either. So if there's anybody that thinks there's a better word for when we're talking about majors or programs that exist on more than one campus, they're not necessarily shared or collaborative, although some may be. The few comments that I have about this of looking at the data was a lot of the ones that have high duplication, and I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, are ones that make sense to me in the sense that it's something that each campus needs, and or it's a service to other programs. So the ones that I noted were biology, English, history, and education. So I think there's a need for education, on every campus. Certainly many of our campuses started off as normal schools to deliver education in the state. And then history often is a service program to those education. English also is a service, while it may have its own standalone program and degree that it confers, it serves many other programs. And then of course, biology serves many programs. On my campus alone, it serves our pre-med students as well as our MLT students and some other majors. So there wasn't anything that stood out to me as something like, why are we offering this on so many campuses? Certainly, there were some things where I think, well, maybe we could work more collaboratively here, and what does that look like? But I don't want to talk a lot. I am not the chair of the faculty reps. I'm someone who is a micromanager and often will take on a facilitator role, but that doesn't mean my voice is more important than any of my colleagues. So I know Ned sent me a note this morning. He does have a conflicting meeting on his campus, and some notes that he said was whether we should continue or discontinue parallel programs. That's a better word, parallel programs. And then he also talked about reconciling differences in program curricula. And I can speak to that last comment a little bit specifically with criminal justice. So that criminal justice is another one that is somewhat parallel, although they have different names. But there was a time a few years ago that University of Maine at Fort Kent, UMPI, and UMA were trying to see if we could come up with a common associate's degree. And just as a first bite, a 2-year degree. And it still was difficult because of some specific things that were on each campus that felt were needed that maybe the other campus didn't. And that collaboration attempt didn't get very far. So having said all that, I apologize if it sounds like I'm rambling. I certainly open it up to my other faculty colleagues to speak to their thoughts about the program's delivery package across campus and any parallel deliveries.
So I will speak up. And when I was looking at the data, one of the first things that came to mind was the simple question of what is in a name? Because there are programs that are similar, they may be parallel, but in the data that we have, they are identified in different areas. And so I just kind of wanted to lay this out there to be clear. So for example, in the data that the system keeps, marine sciences is a category, but UMM's marine biology falls under the biological sciences program. In UMaine, the marine sciences falls under an interdisciplinary studies category. So they can be found in different locations, which kind of implies that they're not necessarily parallel. So sometimes we have to watch in terms of what the title is or the category of where the program lies. And I think some of this gives rise to, I'll kind of say on the faculty side, it can be a point of contention. We may have different programs, but they're often slightly different programs. And from an academic side of things, we can tell that they are different, or we know that they are different. But to an outside viewer, or more specifically a high school student, they wouldn't know the difference. And so even when we have kind of differentiated programs, we likely are going to be competing for some of the same high school students because they can't differentiate. They don't always know what they're looking for. And I'll have to say on the faculty side, we do feel pressure to offer programs that are distinct, but that gives rise to sometimes a point of contention of who should offer the program. And I think that that one, we feel like we're in a rock and a hard spot. There's that push, we need to increase enrollment on our campus. And so I just want to be clear and let you know that faculty do feel that external pressure in some respects. And so one of the things that I want to point out is when we think about parallel competition, however we want to define it, we sometimes really need to think about what does that high school student or that non-traditional student look for or understand as they're being recruited for any campus. And I'll have to point out that there are areas where we do look at this and do use the data to make appropriate decisions. So it's not always we're just looking at this to compete, but I'll point out a number of campuses have environmental related programs, whether they're called environmental studies, environmental science. In some respect, they're very similar. UMM changed our environmental studies programs 2 years ago to really an environmental GIS program. It's a GIS program. And it's the only GIS program really in the system. And so we eliminated our environmental studies program, even though it only had 2 courses that were not in another program or in our course. So it was fairly efficient to offer. But we looked at, our job source burning glass data at the time, and it was clear that there were more graduates than jobs in the field, and that we really were competing with a small number of students. And so we pivoted our program to eliminate the competition and really put our foot in that GIS field, which we, have some very good expertise to. So now we just have to continue to educate high school students on what GIS is and to recruit them into that area. And, my last point with some of the program stuff is I do want to point out that some program duplication is important, as Lisa pointed out. The education, you have place-bound students, you have students who need to do student teaching, so we really need broad access to that. And so that's kind of a few of the comments that I wanted to point out and give you a sense from the faculty side of things, some important things that I think.
So this is Mike Scott from the University of Maine. One of the things that I like to point out is that a lot of times the development of programs are discussed extensively within faculty units. And we spend a lot of time trying to play to the strength of our faculty as well as the needs of degrees that are up and coming. We also spend a lot of time looking at collaborations across campus and interdisciplinary programs. And I think that's one of the strengths that we offer. It's not necessarily looking at duplicating programs elsewhere, but it's playing to the strength of the individual campuses and universities. And the difficulty that it takes and the length of time it takes to develop a program, maybe a year or two. And the reason we could do that is that we understand, we know the faculty within our units and our campuses. The difficulty is working with faculty at other institutions that we really don't have a lot of connection to. And so even though we're trying to develop programs to meet the needs of our students, not often are we sort of trying to hamper students at other campuses. And so it does take time, and we go through the process outlined by the Chancellor's Office. And we try to make sure that we are, working together to come up with programs that are beneficial. And, for us to work across campus, at least at Orono, there's a lot of interdisciplinary programs that I think are the strength of the campuses. And this is something that you have to understand. So we're not really looking at necessarily duplicating programs elsewhere. We're just looking at playing to the strength that we have to offer.
Clyde or Matthew, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just
Lisa,
wanted
yes.
to.
Okay, Matthew, go first.
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back to a conversation that we had with Jeff in our last meeting there was a legendary list of barriers to collaboration that was compiled by Bob Neely. And I asked if you'd be comfortable sharing that with us and giving us a status update. You may have sent that out, but I didn't see it or find it. I'm wondering if we could just take a look at that list and learn where we stand in terms of addressing, I think it was 36 issues or whatever.
Matthew, I do have it. Thank you. And spent part of the break updating it so I could bring it back to the FGC. I will send that to you. Bob Neely worked on that list. Rosa Radonat worked on that list more recently. Rosa, Carolyn Dorsey, and I have worked on it. It's been ever evolving, and we have actually knocked a number of the barriers off of that list and truncated it somewhat. But I will make sure that you and your colleagues have that in advance of the next FGC meeting for sure.
I think it would be very helpful and enable us to focus our discussion a little more if we knew where some of those key issues now stand.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And just to be clear, Jeff, Matthew's not on FGC. So there's kind of these parallel faculty input that we would think of. So if you want the BOT reps to be talking to this committee as well as the full board about our experiences with parallel programs, we would need that too.
I'll do that, Lisa. And just for Trustee McMahon's benefit and everyone else's, I've recently begun sharing messages with the FGC chair and the Senate and Assembly presidents, and would be happy to add the board faculty reps to that group so everyone's getting the same information at the same time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Clyde, I know you wanted to say something, but before I forget, I think something that Michael said really stood out to me about the challenge of being interdisciplinary or intercampus. And I feel like if you look at the programs, there's so many concentrations. And my sense is a concentration is something that doesn't go up to system office. It's something that a campus can pretty much do on its own. And I think that that's an easy route to try out something new. And that's why we've had this maybe expanded portfolio of academic programs. And I think post-COVID and post-unified accreditation, we have this end declining enrollments and budget crisis. We're in this perfect storm that could actually be useful in the sense that we now have an opportunity both through like those cross-linked policy and other things, through the ability to teach courses synchronously via Zoom to other campuses, that we have the ability to have more parallel programs being truly shared or collaborative that we didn't before. So, although you may look at that and go, how did we get here? I think going forward, it's not just bad. I think there's a lot of opportunities, both because of technology, enrollment concerns, budget concerns, and post unified accreditation. Clyde, did you want to go?
Actually, Lisa, that's perfect. I was actually going to bring that up as kind of a positive aspect of where we at. Certainly like on our campus, we've had shrinkages in student numbers, and we're going to obviously had corresponding shrinkages in faculty numbers. So the work with the unified accreditation and the work that Jeff St. John's been doing, I think is really valuable. I know in my programs, in our outer recreation business administration, we're already working with USM to basically bring in their concentrations that they have specialties that we can't offer to make them available to our campus. And we're having ongoing conversations in the business programs for the same sort of idea. So I often wonder though, what more can we do to promote communication between the different groups on the campuses? Because I feel it works when we know each other, but if we don't know each other, there's a lot of hesitancy. And there's too many stories of what's happened in the past, and another campus heard one campus is working on something and then they jump the gun and they get the program and that campus doesn't. And that has happened a lot. I mean, I've heard just recently of, a program that I know Prescal was looking at that's being developed at another campus now. So it seems to me that sometimes collaboration would be a better model than competition, because if our numbers continue to decline, with our demographics, it's only going to put more pressure on our campuses and need to kind of reduce and consolidate. So I appreciate the work the system's been doing with the communication, because I think that's key. It's just a pity that we do kind of have to work a little bit secretively. You know, if we're developing something new, I think it would be better if we were actually talking to other campuses, so that it really could be kind of more unified programs that we were offering. Thank you, Lisa.
So it's Mike Scott again. One of the examples that I like to bring forward is the process that we went through. We have a program that's up for approval today on the human-centered technology design. And we spent 2 years developing this. And it's an interdisciplinary program between computer science, psychology, and communication. And we spent a lot of time working on the interdisciplinary nature of it. Once we had the proposal in a draft form, we sent it out to, and we did explore to see if we were duplicating anything throughout the system. And we sent the proposal to USM, Augusta, Farmington, just to make sure that they had the opportunity to provide some feedback. The difficulty, again, for us is that we don't have an understanding of the psychology departments at these other universities. So we had to develop our program within the construct of our institution. We did get some positive feedback from USM and Farmington. And we did get some feedback and asked some adjustments from Augusta. But we did that to make sure that we were, first of all, aware of other units and other campuses, to make sure that we weren't duplicating, or at least giving them the opportunity. Some of the campuses would like to participate, but the process to which we can sort of open it up to other campuses is going to take time, because we have to establish the program, first, and then look for opportunities to provide other campuses the chance to collaborate or join in if possible. But it goes through a process, and like I said, it's a 2-year process. One of the things that we found out, and when we share this information, we share it with upper administration, deans, and presidents. Through USM, we thought there was only one computer science department down there, but then we realized that there's also a computer technology unit, which we didn't really understand the dynamics of the internal to USM. But this gives us an opportunity to reach out and at least have a better understanding of what are opportunities at the other campuses, and then eventually, hopefully, we will develop the program strong enough so that we can share it with other campuses. But initially, we feel that it has to be developed internally first, just to establish it.
So I believe all the reps that are here have had a chance. Unless someone else had something they wanted to add, I would like to offer that the trustees or any other administration, if they had any questions for us based on this discussion so far this morning. Go ahead, Trustee Alexander.
This was a very, very helpful and interesting discussion. It's pretty clear to me, and I'd be happy to be corrected, that a lot of the collaboration and communications happened without any, I'll use this word, but I don't think it's a good word, mandate that it happened. That a lot of times the interactions are as a result of the goodwill of some of the faculty who is engaged in system type concerns, aware of the demographics, the budgets, the enrollment issues, and so forth. So then my question to you is, what role should the board, from your perspective, play in light of the budget, in light of the demographics, in light of the obligations under the NECHI report to do more in the way of systemness to make sure we're all capable of being accredited. What should the board do to help make this happen in a positive way?
I have an answer to that, but I would like to defer to my colleagues first.
Trustee Alexander, there is a clear process that we go through, and the vice chair for academics has a major role on making sure that we stay within that process. I think the board does need to recognize that we have two issues. We have the need to meet the needs of our students and opportunities for our students, and we should promote that, as well as making sure that duplication doesn't hinder institutions. And I'm not sure the role of the BOT, but I do think that reviewing the current process of establishing programs would be probably a good place to start, just to make sure that we are fair and sincere with all the new opportunities to come forward. And maybe the chancellor's office could speak to any problems that we have between campuses that the board might be able to streamline.
Chair Riley? Oh, sorry, Chair Riley had her hand up. If you could wait.
Did Barbara have a follow-up? This has been a helpful conversation. I'm struck with I think it was William's comment about that we need all things to compete. And obviously we can't all be all things to all people at every one of our universities, given the budget and demographic realities. So does this invite a review of mission? I'm struck that the Machias focus on GIS is a great area of expertise, particularly important, I think, for the smaller campuses. Should we be thinking about refocusing on mission specific, the mission of each campus, so that we have a better understanding of who does what in particular areas?
Well, I guess to reiterate a bit that Michael had said, that is part of the process with even an intent to plan, right? So there's questions that we would have to answer. And one of them is, how does this support the mission of your campus? And I've had some good conversations with Jeff, and even in the past with Robert Placido, about if it is going to be a parallel or duplicate or whatever we're going to use, if it's a program that is somewhat available on another campus, even at the intent to plan page, you have to say, are you working with them? How is this not going to hurt them? How is this going to support them? I think, so I would say the board's role, especially at this subcommittee, because any program that is coming for approval goes through the subcommittee before the full trustee board, is asking those questions of like, well, who are you working with? What other enrollment may be affected by this or supported by this? A mandate of taking that into consideration, as Michael talked about, his program has recently done. And I think Jeff is certainly, in conversations I've had with him, is trying to really emphasize that. It's difficult in a tense environment, as William was saying before, and that faculty feel, and Clyde mentioned this too, that they're at harm. They have a potential for vulnerability because another bigger campus might put the program up first, or this means my program is going to have less enrollment. And we have a history of that competition. And so I think those roadblocks to collaboration and how they're being pushed through is really important information, because in competition gives a disincentive to collaboration, right? We know that. Why am I incentivized to send students to your program when I am being judged by the butts in my seats? Go ahead, William.
So I think you made an interesting point with the thinking about the mission. There is a lot of overlap with each of the mission. And this is actually something that I see within the strategic planning process, both at the system level, and it should funnel down to the campus level, to identify those areas of strength or continue to build on the areas of the strength that each of the campuses have. And I think that that will help, define bottom up where we view it's sort of a subset of the mission, right? And so I think that is an important process to keep in mind as we go through the strategic planning.
Thanks.
Clyde or Matthew, did you have anything? Oh, Trustee Katz, go right ahead.
Thank you. And I'm not a committee member, so thanks for the chance to be able to ask a question. I've got two quick ones if I could. The first one, I've heard a couple people now, Matthew and Jeff mentioned the work that apparently has been done. There was some sort of a document which talks about obstacles to collaboration. I understand that's being updated. If it's appropriate to share that with the board, that would be great, so that we can understand a little bit better the obstacles that you all have apparently identified to collaboration. And the second question is, right at the beginning, Lisa, this has been a great conversation, by the way. Right at the beginning, you mentioned some courses which are clearly need to be taught for various reasons on all the campuses, like biology, like English, like history, perhaps even education. But what's the measure of whether a course or a field ought to be offered on every single campus, like those, as opposed to ones where if we've got them offered on multiple campuses, we're really competing with ourselves in an unhealthy way? How do we figure out which is which?
Yeah, that's a great question, Trustee Katz. I guess what I was saying when I mentioned that was English obviously is in the general education of every campus. Also, there's lots of programs that require some upper level English or communication courses. So I believe the experiences, and often with an education program, there are teachers that are going to be teaching English. So there's going to be some more English classes that they would need, as well as their professional education courses. So it's not that much more of a resource burden to have an English program. If I could use, an example, although at UMPI, we do not have a chemistry program. However, we have one full-time faculty member. We had one. He's taken the special retirement incentive, and we are still going to hire for that. And you would think, well, you don't even have a chemistry program, but it's such an important service to our MLT, to our biology, and our PTA, other programs, that we need it. So what I was trying to say is, in some cases, a program serves so many other programs that it's not that much bigger of a lift to have it as a standalone. That was what I was trying to get across. As far as your question of how do we decide, no, we really need this, that's a big discussion. I'll defer to my colleague Eric if he has an answer for that.
I don't know that I have an answer for that one, Lisa, but I have a thought about it. And I think this is something that's probably best sorted bottom up rather than top down. If we think about the mission of individual campuses, the programs that support that mission, and the students who come to those campuses, and then think holistically about, well, let's see, we have language arts or English in some fashion that's distributed broadly across all campuses. It's sort of a necessary part of a core liberal arts education, generally speaking. So we'd expect that one to be pervasive. Is biology similar in that respect? Probably so. What other ones are there? I think the best approach to that is to look at what courses and what programs support individual campuses, and then take a step back and try and look at that more holistically from the bottom up rather than from the top down. Because the primary point, I would imagine, is to support the work being done on individual campuses, to support the students that are arriving at those campuses to achieve their goals. And if something comes of that in a sort of synergistic way, then that we can capitalize on, then that sounds fruitful. But I'd be hesitant to try and take a global look at what programs need to exist on all courses and how can we share those. simply because then that's more imposing on the individual campuses and individual programs that you must have thus and so. The other aspect of that that's certainly challenging, speaking as biologist, is some things, as we're thinking about this, right, being able to offer programs remotely from one campus to another, some things need to be done in person. I mean, it's just a matter of fact. I need you in the lab doing things with your hands, with the equipment that I have set out for you. And that's not something that can be done at a distance. And even as sophisticated as some of the digital labs out there are, they're not a replacement for training a good biologist to be able to handle the equipment that they need to do or do the field work that they need to do. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth on that question. It's a good question.
Yeah, and I think we have to balance those things. As I was saying earlier, I feel like we're at a turning point that can be seen as positive here, where we have a lot of retirements, we have a budget crisis, and then if we have a new program, like, do you have the in-house resources on your campus? And if not, is there resources on other campuses that you could leverage? And is it appropriate, right? Is it appropriate to have it delivered online or not? So all of those questions have to be taken into consideration. So I really feel like we are drifting into the part of the Venn diagram that does overlap with the Faculty Governance Council. So I believe all the trustees and hopefully everybody else on the Zoom call have seen the recently approved charter of the Faculty Governance Council that was approved by senates or assemblies of all campuses. And one of their jobs is to be kind of watching these things. So we have here, Eric is a member of the Faculty Governance Council, as well as Jamie Morera, as well as Cindy Dean. William, Otto, and myself serve in both Faculty Rep and Faculty Governance Council. I'm kind of a lower member of the Faculty Governance Council. Jamie is a long-term member from it was first created and is currently co-chair. So absent any other pressing questions about what we've just said, I'd like to give it over to Jamie to just kind of give a little explanation or the history of it briefly, and so we could talk about that if everyone is okay. Jamie?
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting the FGC here, giving us an opportunity to speak directly. And I'll send apologies on behalf of the actual chair, the head chair. I'm sort of the junior partner. Blake Whittaker is in surgery today. He tore a knee tendon and he's having that repaired today. So he would very much love to be here. So the FGC was called together completely out of the blue, actually. The presidents were invited in the winter of 2020 to form this committee, and in the context of integrated or of the unified accreditation. And we've been kind of struggling with our mandate because essentially it was handed to us and said, it's completely up to you to what you wanted to do. Very few of us had met each other before, which, as has already been said today, is one of the obstacles to working together with faculty on different campuses. It's not because we don't want to. It's just it's hard to pick up a phone and cold call somebody who you don't know. A lot of the first year was sort of just getting to know each other. We were helped greatly by Robert Placido, and Carolyn Dorsey was one of the original members as well, before she became a system employee. And there was a lot of, because unified accreditation was a completely new experiment in university, we had no models to work from. So needless to say, there was a lot of just looking at different possibilities and different options. So we were, and I don't even want to say we were slow to get started, because it was just too many unanswered questions that we had to sort of creatively think about what to do. So the actual charter, we put through a version of that finally in the fall, I think, of 20, and it started to go through the cycle of ratification. 6, or I guess 7 of 8 campuses or 8 institutions approved it in the by the summer of 21, with one holdout, which happened to be the largest campus in the institution. So that brought us back again to revamping the charter, and myself and Sarah Hardy worked on it last spring, and with a few edits from the general committee, we finally cobbled that together last April or May. And so that was ratified in September. And I don't know why notification of that didn't filter its way through to the system, but for some reason, NETCHI ended up with the impression that we still didn't have a charter. I mean, that's the short form of the history. I don't know if trustees have questions about some of the options we considered or what else we've been up to. I'd be more than happy to answer them. I know we have been working with Robert Placido on the administrative practice letters. We've actually have some of those gone through and approved. So we have been actually getting work done, but I think we're just sort of finding our feet now and moving forward. So again, if anybody else from the council wants to add to that, or if the trustees have questions, happy to answer them if I can.
I will say to, oh, go ahead, Barbara.
My question is, what role does the Faculty Governance Council intends or thinks it should play with regard to this entire issue we just spent 30 minutes talking about, which is duplicative, shared, or parallel courses, and the development of new majors and coordination among the campuses? So.
One of the reasons, and Mike can probably speak to this better than I can, but one of the reasons that there were some delays with the charter was universities were fairly adamant that governance in and of itself, the actual how individual bodies of faculty worked with administrators, both at the university level and at the system level, was still going to remain on campus, that they did not want, as the term that has been floating around, the idea of a super senate was not something that faculty were interested in. And I think that's pretty well, that was where Orono really pushed back. But I think the wisdom of that is generally agreed to by all members of the council right now. So ultimately, we believe in campus autonomy, and we're happy to have input. What we see ourselves as is a conduit for sending out information. I know I've been at Machias for about 15 years, and essentially we would get reports back from programs coming in from different parts of the state, which seemed to compete with ours. Rec management was one of the ones that was an issue. The Faculty Governance Council, that information will be communicated to faculty senates much more quickly than it would be through the other channels of waiting till something actually gets to the BOT and then can be brought back to faculty by our BOT reps. So I think that as a conduit for information across the system, I think that's where our role is. And that's the role we would like to maintain. The idea that we are something that would approve programs, that is not something that the council has decided that it wants to do.
So I'll follow up with that a little bit. In the program approval process, before any program even comes to this committee, it will have gone to the Faculty Governance Council so that each campus knows what is coming forth. And so then there can be proactive conversations about how to collaborate. So one of the barriers that was kind of mentioned in the conversation was, how do we know what the psychology program at this other campus is? Well, through the Faculty Governance Council, we're getting those program proposals, or we should be, so that that information can be brought back to our campuses, so that individual campuses can then see, oh, this is an area we could collaborate. so that it's really much more, it provides a much more proactive conversation rather than a reactive after something has been approved. Oh, it's going to compete with us. What do we do now?
I would add there's some hiccups when Robert Placido was still VCAA, as far as it's kind of like what we've been going through this morning of finding the right language of what is a multi-campus program. So the FGC's definition has always been it's some kind of shared programming, whether you call it a cooperating department as defined by the AFM contract or something else, like GIS is always held up as the current example, where they share courses across, but they give their own degree, they confer their own degree. Robert Placido always had it, a multi-campus program is something that happens on more than one campus, like what we've been calling either duplicate or parallel this morning. And the current charge says that the FGC hears about a single campus program, whether it's parallel or not, but it's for informational purposes only. They do not give any feedback through the process. And so that, gives us knowledge, but as it current stands, the FGC has no engaged role in the process of program approval for a single campus program, even if it is a parallel or duplicate from another one. It's for informational purposes only. So I think that's a bit of the rub that we've been talking about this morning, that the former VCAA thought the FGC was going to be much more involved in those type of proposals than what the charter says. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Trustee Alexander, and I apologize for calling you Barbara. When I see people's names on the screen, I automatically go to their first name. I don't know if Eric or Cindy wanted to add anything from the FGC point or other questions from the trustees.
I think you all captured what I was hoping to say eloquently. So thank you for that.
So Mike Scott here. One of the things that I think we should recognize is as unified accreditation is a new model, I think the FGC is also a new model. And I think the beauty of it is that it's going to allow us to start to share and understand, what each campus's faculty governance process is. And I think in time that will evolve, but I do think for right now, when I was president of University of Maine's Faculty Senate, it was very difficult to communicate with. We didn't really have a structure to communicate with other presidents. And I think the FGC now gives us that opportunity. And I think we need time to allow it to evolve and to hopefully support the campuses. The one thing that you really have to understand is that the faculty governances of each campus, it's a long process. And we have to recognize that, as the FGC is introduced to new areas from the system, they need the time to bring it back to the campuses to have their faculty units, assemblies, senates be able to provide input and then bring it back to the FGC. And that's a process. And I think you have to understand that it's not going to happen overnight. It may take a month. It may take, what I call Senate time. And that is something that doesn't happen right away. James?
Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up really quickly on what Lisa said about the individual programs. And it's true that we have no approval or even vetting function while regarding these individual programs, but the FGC itself as it exists does allow the members of individual campuses, if they have concerns or questions about individual programs, to talk to Jeff St. John or whoever is occupying the vice chancellor role to get more information or to offer their campus perspective. So one of the things that Blake Whitaker has been very enthusiastic about with the FGC from the get-go is that this is a channel of communication that is simply brand new and can do, I'm sure it could do harm, but it's going to do a lot more good than any problem that's going to create. And it gives faculty a direct channel of communication with the system and through events like this with the BOT as well. But that in itself will be a very valuable addition to, especially within the context of unified accreditation, to the system and how it functions. Oops, sorry.
Are there, Cindy, did you have anything you wanted to add, or there's anything else from the reps or other questions from the trustees?
I'll just add, I thank you again for this conversation. And this is exactly why the FGC is an excellent body, because it has opened these conversations that we have never had before with various constituencies across the system. And that's been really great. As Jamie mentioned, and as Michael mentioned, that, we didn't know one another. This gives us an opportunity to get to know one another, to know our faculties, to know our expertise, and to have conversations, again, that have not happened in the past. So as a communicative body, it's wonderful. And I applaud, the work that the FGC is doing.
Chair Riley?
Thanks, Lisa. Could I ask just an organizational question? We have a much more robust FTC, faculty rep representation to the Board of Trustees. You have overlapping members. Is that adequate? Do we need an FGC member as well, or can we stick with our faculty rep and rely on them as they have today to bring us directly to you when appropriate?
If I could speak to that, I mean, right now it's a matter of coincidence. There's nothing that would guarantee that there's an overlap. It might be useful to have some mechanism for ensuring that there is FGC representation to the BOT. I'd be all for that.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up, Trish. And I do want to, again, apologize to my faculty rep colleagues other than William, who didn't know that the FGC was going to be speaking today, as I didn't bring that to them until late last week. But I also want to say thanks to Trish when she reached out to myself and William, saying, literally her email said, we are very aware that when we're talking about things that is the faculty is happening or doing, we want to hear directly from the faculty. And I really appreciate that, because it's certainly speaking to concerns that we've had in the past. So I don't know what that looks like. I think the faculty reps would have to talk about it, maybe FGC leadership talk about it, but I know that Jamie and hopefully some other faculty reps, certainly I know Cindy will be there at the full meeting on the 30th in Augusta. And just as I gave up some of faculty rep time this morning, Jeff St. John has agreed to give up some of his time at the full board meeting to hear, so all trustees can hear from the FGC members. And the other thing is, I think there are lanes here that BOT shouldn't necessarily be in implementation, which is part of FGC's role. But for informational purposes, certainly maybe a report or a liaison or a double membership might be useful. That's all I would say. Does anybody else have anything else they want to ask or mention about our conversations this morning? Oh, look at this. I'm ahead of time. That's great. Trustee McMahon, thank you for putting up with the last, relatively last minute topic change and giving us a full hour this morning. Just to everyone else, I apologize. I do have to leave at about 10:45 as I have a medical appointment. So that's why I'll be heading off early. But Trustee McMahon, I'll give the meeting back over to you.
Well, thank you very much. That was quite informative, and I think it's a very good idea to allow these type of discussions to go forward. I look forward to meeting with the reps to the Board of Trustees in Augusta later on in the month, and we can pick the topic for the next ASA committee meeting. As you said, you didn't want me picking the topics, you wanted to pick the topics, and that's fine by me. That is absolutely fine by me. The next item on the agenda is the student representative discussion. We have no discussion on the agenda, but I wonder if Divya or Aidan Mulroney have any issues they would like to raise. Divya, why don't you go first?
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm going to speak on something, and maybe Aidan, you can fill in the gaps afterwards. There are two things I wanted to bring up. One being something we talked about at the in-person meeting at the University of Maine at Farmington. I think it would be great for student representatives to have a formal space to speak at those meetings as we go forward with them. And I know, Trish, you reached out, and I would love to continue that conversation of how we might do that. And also Trustee Cates, I think you also talked with some of the student representatives, and we'd love to continue that conversation of how that might show up in the future meetings. And then second, I wanted to bring this from student representatives who have been thinking about, very much in line with what professors were talking about just now, collaborating across campuses. I think there's been an idea brewing for increased student engagement between undergraduate students and graduate students, and maybe that looking like a mentorship program that is supported by the university faculty and staff and other community members. I think there are lots of different avenues, including alumni networking, mentoring between graduate students and undergrad students, maybe visits on undergrad campuses to talk about what graduate school is, what it looks like, how that could benefit someone in their career. So lots of ideas in the works. Maybe these conversations have been going on and I just don't know about them, but we would love to plug into any of the work that's already been happening here too. Aidan, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you. As a undergrad student, I can say from personal experience that I and my friends have little idea what grad school actually looks like, even those who are currently applying for various grad schools. And then as to the role of student representatives, there is a degree of formally, my job is to show up and take notes and then go back to Senate and give them anything that I think is important from those notes. And that seems like a very one-way flow of information, whereas if you can ask me questions, there should be a more formal space for me to provide information to you. And that's my 2 cents.
Do any members of the Board of Trustees who are on the call have any questions for Aidan or Divya?
I guess, Chair McMahon, I would just say that we eagerly await that, and because you have a voting member on the board, see Divya in that role. So the more you talk through it with each other and think about how to best do that, we are open to your suggestions.
Trustee Alexander.
So ditto to Chair Riley's invitation. And it occurred to me that the students might have an input on some of these issues about shared courses, duplicate courses, parallel courses, single unit courses versus multiple access to courses. And it would be interesting to think through how that voice could be involved in this process. Just occurred to me. I don't have a suggestion as such, just an idea of something Divya and her colleagues might want to be talking about.
And I think to add to that, I think one of the comments that William Otto made was that we have course descriptions that are not necessarily differentiated as far as high school students are concerned And I would think that although they're no longer high school students, it's probably recent history for them. We could get some feedback from the student reps in that area.
Oh, absolutely. As a history major, I applied to most every UMS school because they all offer history to some degree. And like, it is looking at the professors and their research backgrounds is how you find out what classes you'll actually take. And no one officially told me that until I got to school and had taken a semester. And that's something where for that subject, at least, someone in admissions should probably give someone a heads up for that.
Good point. Divya, Aidan, any final comments?
On the piece about further meetings and student engagement or student representative engagement, I would love to maybe type up a memo and get that to you, maybe suggest how we could incorporate it, and we can get feedback on that and try to implement it at the next meeting, or whenever it seems appropriate, if that sounds like a good next step.
That works for me. Rosa, do you have any comments on that?
Nope, that sounds logical. It's been difficult for the students to engage fully, and I think if Divya is willing to play a role in that, I say yay, let's go for it.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you both very much for your participation. The next item on the agenda is a new academic program proposal, BS in Human-Centered Technology Design at UM, and I believe Provost Verlin is going to be making that presentation. Over to you.
Thank you, Trustee McMahon. Good morning, everyone. This is a new proposal by the School of Computing Information Sciences to establish a Bachelor of Science in Human-Centered Technology. So human-centered technology design is a fast-growing major nationally. It can be found in a variety of programs and disciplines. I mean, you'll see it in computer information science, engineering. Some new areas are in gaming, arts, digital technology, communication programs. Our proposed program, as you heard Michael Scott talk a little bit earlier, is interdisciplinary. It's a program that would only be one of its kind in the state of Maine, and it intersects with computer science, new media, psychology, and spatial informatics. So it's an intensive project-based curriculum. And the neat thing is it's actually also starting to incorporate and build in the research learning experiences and the career pathways, which are really in high demand areas. It's a major that focuses on what we can do with technology for specific purposes. So eventual designers that are trained here can help produce products and services that are sought by industry that increasingly rely on sophisticated visualizations and simulations of advanced procedures. So the major will help a workforce need here within the state. It also provides a growing and innovative area that definitely will attract new students. If you looked at the Burning Glass data, you see that it's extraordinary growth. In Maine alone, there were 2,100 job openings. 96% of those required a Bachelor of Science degree. If we look at the employment in this area, it's expected to grow about 16% over the next 10 years. Happy to answer any specific questions, but thank you for considering our proposal for this new major in human-centered technology.
Questions of Provost Verlin, Trustee Alexander.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to review what is obviously a fairly lengthy process that has been gone through to develop this program. I don't want any of my remarks to be interpreted as opposition to the idea of this program. That is not my concern, and I will usually defer to the universities as to what the needs are and how to develop a program of this kind. the details of which I do not claim to have any expertise. So I look at this from big picture issues that I feel comfortable addressing from the board's point of view. And one of them, there are two basic ones, and I'll just outline them real briefly, and I'm sure there will be a discussion in response to my concerns. The first one has to do with what I thought was a lack of definitive description as to how this program would be integrated, made available, or somehow following the process of making sure other campuses would integrate into the program either through faculty or students or comparable courses that would be feeding into the degree at University of Maine. And the cover letter for this mentioned two very vague ideas that two different presidents indicated might be something to be explored later. And my concern was, after 2 years, I fully expected to be more definitive in that area, to be blunt. And the second one has to do with budgets. The materials here clearly indicated that additional resources would be required, and I didn't see a fiscal note here. I didn't know how you intended to address that aspect of the program. So I will make that very high-level comment and enjoy hearing a more discussion of what the next steps might be here.
Great. Thank you for that, Trustee Alexander. I'll attempt to answer this, and then Michael Scott actually might want to jump in as well, as he's actually a faculty member in New Media. But as he described earlier, and it builds off that conversation that we just had for an hour with the faculty reps, there is a very intentional intent to plan procedure that's done with all the CAOs. So this particular program went as an intent to plan in December of 21, so over a year ago. And discussions happen, there with all the CAOs on that, like if it always comes out in those meetings, if there is ever what may be perceived overlap, et cetera, we're often saying, can your dean reach out to our dean and start these discussions, as an example. That was definitely done in this regard. And in fact, this summer, Provost Zakis, asked, how's that coming along? We're really excited about that proposal. And certainly we will be looking at down the road, as Mike had indicated, potential areas where, some of the elective courses, they have a lot of online courses that may fit in here. This is a proposal that definitely the core right now is going to be offered by psychology and computer science. And New Media, New Media is in computer science. And it is very much a hands-on, because it's very project-based, but I think we'll see, more and more interconnections across the system on that. Like any good dean, Dean Haddad, who is the dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, when she first put this in, she did indicate the resources question that you asked. She and I actually went back and forth quite a bit on that. And in fact, when I asked the deans, last May to put in their strategic hiring for the following year, one of her top positions was in New Media. And it doesn't mean we keep adding new positions in an area and continue to do this. It means that we would probably have to decrease in other areas, or other areas fall off that kind of high priority list. With the SRI, that's happened after we've looked at the 2 rounds of the special retirement incentive. It turns out our computing and information sciences school is having the most retirements of any across all of our departments and schools. We have 6 retirees in computing and information sciences, and so it'll actually even be, we're not going to be able to hire 6 faculty right away, but there will be a few that we definitely focus in on this. This is a high growth area, and one of those for sure will be New Media, and those are kind of the resources that the dean was indicating at the time. And so I do think, in reality, these intent plans, they often last a year, these proposal developments. And they're very thoughtful. There's lots of feedback. We really do look for collaborations across universities. I actually think at some level we're less nimble than other institutions that don't have this process. But in fairness, this is the way that we can get all voices heard during the developmental process here. And so, this is one of those areas that I think is these are really thoughtful conversations that happen among all the CAOs. And then there's feedback that goes back and forth during this process. It's also another reason they take their time. And finally, we also have to run it through our whole university process. So these go through all whole university process. So the College of Engineering was very much engaged in this. The College of Natural Sciences, Forestry, and Agriculture were very much engaged with this process as we were going through. And so it goes through a lot of levels. And I actually think it was incredibly thoughtful and thorough.
So, Trustee Alexander, I will say that we really considered opportunities for students at other campuses to participate in this. Because it's a hands-on program, we've considered the possibility, and again, this is something of exploration, is to have a summer institute where students can come and participate in the program and then return to their various campuses and at least have that experience and possibly allow the individual campuses to extend their programs to incorporate human-centered. But because it's hands-on and because it's somewhat unique, having a summer institute, I don't really know many campuses that offer that. But that would be, for us, an exciting opportunity to engage students from other campuses.
I do have a response to both issues. The budget one in particular, the materials the board has in front of it for the approval of this call for additional resources. So it would be helpful if this was amended to make clear that either you need them or you don't. And that is pretty crucial to our understanding of the decision the board is being asked to make here. And then as to the first issue, I appreciate the goodwill and the discussions that are going on and the fact that it is perhaps not possible at this time to actually develop a particular proposal, a course, an interaction. But it would be helpful from my perspective at the board to understand what it is we're approving here that does not include any commitments in that regard. And so even if there was a plan that was going to be subsequently developed or a commitment that a level of integration would occur over a specific period of time after the approval of the program, that would also help me. So there are a couple things here that I would ideally like to see amended in the proposal prior to obtaining my approval for it. And I think either of those things could be done and moved along fairly quickly if, in fact, as you orally have described it, these things are in the works. I appreciate that.
So I would just add that I think the proposal on its own, given the high student, I think it's a huge need in this area. We will, as you can see, the projection and growth here will be quite substantial. And so I think it can actually stand alone. And as the program grows, I think we can find those areas of interconnection. But I do hear what you're saying on that. On the resource side, we're not asking for more resources from the system on this. It will be a reprioritizing of existing resources that we have here. And so, some other areas will fall low on the priority list, and new media will fall higher up and computing information sciences will fall higher up on that.
Well, again, it would be helpful to have that made clear here, so I know what I'm voting for. That's all. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Other trustees? If not, if I could ask a couple of questions of Provost Delaney. First of all, 2,100 vacancies. Have we reached out to any of the employers who have vacancies? Have we reached out to, say, the top 3 or 4 and making sure that we're on track to graduate students who would be useful? And secondly, then perhaps more minor, esports is a growing, shall I say, field, something that there are a lot of students in the computer sciences who like esports. And in fact, parenthetically, I think more people watch the esports world championships than the soccer world championships.
They do. It's incredible.
Of the younger generation. Now, I find that hard to believe, but but that's what I'm told. So could you comment on those 2 things, please, John?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And apparently it's true, but I can't see myself sitting down either and watching it. But in any case, yeah, so almost every college here has, external advisory boards that are, not only just with alumni on there, but alumni often industry partnerships, et cetera. In this case, and Mike could talk more, speak more to this than I could, but for instance, Tyler Technologies, which has this great program for great competition for high school students and their top students. They provide tuition to go to any of the universities in the system. Tyler Technologies is actually building right off campus here a new kind of headquarters, if you will, and they have been funding for the last couple of years a recruitment person in the School of Computing and Information Sciences. They're very excited about this proposal as an example, and so that just gives you an example of we're constantly in contact with industry partners, and I can't speak more specifically to this particular one, but that's just definitely par for the course of what we do. And it's and so with esports, that's interesting. It is an incredibly rapid growing sector. I think it's been 100% growth since 2019. It generates close to $2 billion in revenues. And of course, it's this very much an emerging technology area for many colleges, universities. We have a small esports group here, and it's going to grow, and we're going to see this continue to really take off. This proposal itself provides a unique opportunity to focus on game design and programming. So there is the design elective pathway, which allows students to get into graphic design, information architecture. There's also the emerging technology elective pathway, and that includes AI and mobile app design and game design programming coursework. And finally, for those students who are more interested in the management or business side of esports, there's this entrepreneurship and innovation pathway that provides kind of a coursework around ethics and innovation engineering and that kind of the business commercial acumen around technology. And so I think this is going to be I think we're going to see that, we are going to see this continue to grow at universities. And I think this human-centered technology design major will really help us in that space. Great question, by the way. Thanks.
President Rini Mundy.
Thank you, Trustee McMahon. We're very excited about this, obviously, this kind of groundbreaking offering for the people of Maine, the students of Maine, and well beyond. And I just wanted to add that when I worked at the National Science Foundation, it was now about 7 years ago when we laid out what would be the big areas of focus for the next generations of research. And the top of the list was the future of work at the human technology frontier. And so the NSF began funding programs and funding research and funding learners really to figure out what this could look like. I think this gives us a foundation for internal interactions that have not yet been fully worked out, but think about the 3D printed house and the ways in which the design of that house has a human technology interface implication. And so to Trustee Alexander's very good points about making sure that we have pathways for as many people to get involved as we can. Some of that needs to happen internally, and of course, as we go forward and get this moving externally as well. It's a very exciting area.
Trustee Cates.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come back to something that Barbara raised. I am particularly impressed with this program and what President Freddie Money just said about it. But again, being concerned with fiscal issues. So you mentioned, John, that this program is going to require more resources, although it's not entirely clear to me how much. But you said, look, we'll make sure that we are tightening our belt elsewhere, so to speak, to make up for additional money we're spending here. And I believe you, but what is the process for making sure that happens? Because we've obviously got to be concerned about adding to our budget total in the demographic times in which we're facing it. Again, it's no question about this particular program, but how are we going to know, and what's your specific process so that we know that somewhere else is going to be cut a little bit to make room for this great new thing?
Great. I see the president has her hand up, so go ahead, John.
I'll jump in on that one, Trustee, if that's okay. So beginning, I think it may be next week, we start a series of internal budget hearings with every dean and every cabinet member coming to a prolonged session with us to lay out their initial thinking about budget for the fiscal year 24. And that process has a lot of boundaries around it, and that's unfolding as we speak. And so the decisions about how we prioritize, how we meet our budget challenges, and how we watch enrollment, those all are eventually in the end sit with me, but they come from these discussions that we have together as we roll together everything that we wish to prioritize. And there's no question that the focus on engineering, technology, computing has been a central strategic priority for the university for several years. And so we'll continue with that, but we do understand that it's in many ways a zero-sum game. And so that comes through what gets proposed by deans and then the final reviews of our budget work going forward.
Thanks.
Chair Riley.
Thank you. I'm struck by the significance of this and by Trustee Alexander's questions that are more than legitimate, and I think raise real issues for us as we think about these programs. And I'm reflecting on the discussion at the last meeting where we approved a new program at USM for, I think, industrial engineering without this kind of rigor and thought. And I think it's something that we ought to think about how we review these things. My question at the moment is, do we need to come back to another meeting to address Trustee Alexander's questions? And if so, do we have time to do that and not compromise getting this up and going? Or could the minutes reflect our concerns and reflect? Now I'm a little confused. Is this an internally funded new program, or is it a program that requires new funds? If it's the former, I think we can do that through a minute clarification so that we can move on. But I guess I get the question for you, President Freddie Money, is what's the timing that's required, and is this new money or existing dollars?
This has to be done on existing dollars. We don't have any mechanism for seeking new money. We would hope over time, as tuition revenues start to come in, that overall that begins to build us. And by the way, as indirect cost returns come in, because having a program like this will enable faculty like Dr. Scott and his colleagues to be able to attract federal funding as well. So in my view, I think it would be fair to say it's existing funds realignment of what we have to make this work initially. And then timing wise, we would certainly love to be able to have this on the books for students who would enter in the fall of 23. I mean, it would be a very attractive offering to have at that time. And we have a commitment through the Alphon funding to double the number of engineers and computing professionals that we're producing for the state of Maine. We have to be starting on that. So as soon as possible, and we're happy to provide additional information and maybe bring it as amendments in the board discussion following, we would hope, your consideration here.
That's what I'm trying to think about is, could it come to another ASA meeting? I just don't want to compromise the timing. And I do think what we need to do for this and other programs is make sure the board has oversight and you report back to us on how rollout actually works.
Trustee Alexander?
Well, to follow up on Chair Riley's suggestions, I can say two ways to proceed from the board perspective or my own perspective. One is to include language in the motion that we're voting on today, which might be difficult to do in a group of in the middle of this meeting, but I'm open to that idea. And the motion would have two conditions. One is the development of specific plans for integration or communication or collaboration to be reported back within a certain time period. And the second would be a statement that there would be no incremental funding necessary to produce this program. If those two things got incorporated in the current motion, I could move forward. And then we could discuss how this came about at the board meeting. The other way is to have ASA approve it with the understanding that there will be some motions about different language at the board meeting. And the third way is to, do this at the next ASA meeting. And I'm open to all three of those ideas. I'm interested in moving forward, but those two issues need some specific record matter for my purposes. And frankly, I don't think the minutes are sufficient.
Vice Chancellor St. John?
I wish I could claim to be as smart as Trustee Alexander. I stumbled upon one of her suggestions just before she spoke, so I am now feeling smarter than I usually do. Trustee Alexander, the first of your three suggestions makes strong sense to me. I think it's the cleanest procedurally, although if Ellen tells me that's wrong, she's not afraid to tell me that I'm wrong. If we build your stipulations into the motion of approval, then I would work directly with Provost Volin to ensure that both are met prior to the meeting at the end of the month. In that way, taking your good feedback into account, your concerns are addressed concretely before the board approves the final proposal that approves the program. And at the same time, we continue on an aggressive track of moving the program forward for all of the considerations that President Freeney-Mundy and Provost Volin have outlined previously. I think that meets your smart feedback and addresses the issue directly and substantively while keeping us moving forward in a good way.
Thank you. I completely agree with your suggestion. Thank you.
Do you have a modified motion, Chair?
I would say that we would move to approve the program with further description of how other UMS universities will be invited to participate from the point of approval going forward, and that we invite University of Maine to specifically articulate how budget will be met to support this program. And I think that language then provides a platform for me or for me and President Freeney-Mundy at the end of the month in Augusta to specifically come back and speak how those two considerations have been met before the board is approving this program. And Trustee McMahon, if that moves the program itself from consent agenda into my VCA update, I'd be happy to build time into my VCA update to take it up, talk it through, allow, of course, for any questions from Trustee Alexander or any other trustee, and make sure that the board's concerns have been definitively met.
Trustee McMahon, I just tried to get down what Jeff said and put it in the chat as language for amending the resolution.
Or is the simplest way of doing it just to strike consent out of the motion and then just move it to the agenda for discussion so we can have time to craft everything? So what we will be doing is we will be moving this to the agenda for the board meeting for discussion.
I agree with that, Trustee McMahon.
That might be the easiest way of doing it. So all we're doing is passing it forward. We're not ruling on it. We're passing it forward to the agenda for the Board of Trustees.
I did think that President Mundy's description of what the issues are or the basis for our moving it forward would be useful to have on the record for this meeting. And I thought that was very helpful.
Heather, can you pull that from the chat and make sure it's included in a note to me or in the notes?
Absolutely, and it will be included in the minutes too as to why we pulled it from the consent agenda. So we'll add that all in and I will get that to you as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Could I just ask for some clarification? If it goes to the board with these clarifications and amendments and additional detail, and would we be in a position, I guess this is a question perhaps to Ellen, if the board approves it at that meeting, is it done then? Or, I mean, that can happen without an ASA approval?
Yes, that's correct, Joan.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So what's the pleasure of the trustees on the committee? Are we voting just to put it on the agenda, or do we want to incorporate this language that President Farina Mundy has put in the chat?
Well, I would ask Ellen or Jeff procedurally what would be more appropriate. I mean, I'm happy to have this language as part of the description in the minutes as to why we moved it forward, or we could add it to a formal motion, but I'm open to either approach. So the easiest thing to do is just to move to put this on the agenda for the forthcoming Board of Trustees meeting with a reference to the fact that the minutes reflect the discussion as to why this proposal is being made, or we could include this language in the motion. That's what I defer to the office to determine.
Ellen?
Either would be fine. I think probably adding the note to the minutes with further clarification would be very beneficial for historical purposes.
Oh, yeah.
Barbara, those minutes then provide marching orders for John, Joan, and me to put our heads together and make sure we've covered these two bases very thoroughly in advance of the meeting at the end of the month.
What I'm hearing is that you're happy with just a motion to defer this to the full board meeting and including this in the minutes, and I'm happy with that. That's fine.
So do I take that you are proposing that the motion be that the Academic and Student Affairs Committee forward this item to the agenda of the Board of Trustees meeting 29th, 30th, 2023 of January for approval of the following resolution, that the Board of Trustees, we won't use that, right? We just do the first paragraph?
Yes, I think deferring it for discussion is the appropriate thing.
So it just becomes the first paragraph, that the Academic and Student Affairs Committee forward this item to the agenda of the January 29th, 30th, 2023 Board of Trustees meeting for approval of the resolution.
Yes.
Do you have that, Ellen and Heather?
Yes, I'm all set.
Okay, so I have a motion. Do we have a second? Seconded by Trustee Riley. Any further discussion? I'm going between screens here. If not, Ellen, would you take the roll, please?
I believe Trustee Ames has a question.
Thank you. What is concerning to me about this is future planning purposes for other universities that want to bring academic proposals forward. This seems to be appropriate for this particular proposal. But going forward, I don't know, as that we want to always send this type of request to the board as a whole. So this is unique to this proposal, but I think at some point we need to think about what this does to other proposals coming forward and its impact, because it does affect timing. I think everyone's points are fair. I think it's a good compromise, but I just raised the question about going forward. How are we going to treat these proposals?
Do you have any suggestions?
Chair McMahon, this is the Chancellor. Could I speak to this for just one moment?
Absolutely, Chancellor.
So I agree with in many ways the desire of the board to play a hands-on role with respect to the budget deliberations and, quite frankly, construction at each of the campuses. But I think we do at some point need to take a breather on this, certainly moving this to the agenda, this as a one-off, while we give some real consideration to the implications of requiring that each academic change have attached to it a financial note. We historically have called upon the presidents at each of the universities to balance their budgets. Now, some of them have done that very well over given periods of time, and some of them have not done very well. But one of my concerns about the process that we may be backing ourselves into is whether it will lead to less innovation rather than more innovation, because someone's going to have to name what goes away ahead of the time that the board would even deliberate whether they would allow that to happen. And I absolutely agree with the necessity of tighter budgetary controls and the charge that the board has laid out. But I truly am concerned about whether this might stifle innovation going forward, requiring it to be delivered in the way that we are now contemplating. I just wanted to put that out there for folks.
Could I respond to that?
Sure.
Well, to respond to Lisa, I'm hoping this discussion sends a signal about what the ASA, me on the ASA anyway, are looking for with respect to these new major and course schools and programs. So I think that if this document in front of us had included more of this information, I would be, we would, from the board's perspective, I would be able to move forward. So I was sending a signal about what I expect. And I think that the ASA is the proper forum for getting these resolved. As to the budget issue, if this had come to us with a proposal to spend more money, I am not sure I would oppose that. What I did oppose is the notion that it said we needed more money, but the provost and chancellor indicated, the president indicated, in fact, it wouldn't result in costing more money. So I was looking for a specific description of what the intent was and not necessarily demanding that it didn't cost more money. We just needed to know the answer to that question. And so that's why these two items were missing from my ability to approve it as proposed. I hope that helps.
Chair, may I speak for just one more minute?
Absolutely.
So I thank you for laying it out that way, Trustee Alexander, because I think it is important that we require of our presidents a statement about the financial implications or costs associated with new programs. But going to much beyond that, and quite frankly, holding them to it, I fear will stifle. So let's find the right road forward. I think that this having been raised, I'm all for tighter financial controls. So don't get me wrong there. I just want to make sure that we're not then interfering with the process of innovation and bringing new programs to our campuses. You know, we don't just compete against universities within our system. Thomas, Unity, Husson, and St. Joe's take a large percentage of Maine students, as does UMass and UNH. So we have to be in a position to compete with those universities as well. And then one final note relating to that prior conversation and this context of that conversation is other universities have proven themselves able to innovate much more rapidly than we do. And I don't want to interfere with that, but I now, with your statement, Trustee Alexander, understand better what is being required of us, and clearly a statement to remain within a budgetary process and within a budget allocated is an important one.
Thank you, Chancellor. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion before Ellen takes the roll? Ellen, would you take the roll, please?
Trustee Martin has a question.
I just have a comment on it. It does sound like one of my big frustrations since I've been serving on this board is that we are not quick to the market and the privates are eating our lunch. But we do have these financial constraints, and it sounds like Trustee Alexander, correct me if I'm wrong, that maybe we have more of a template of what we require when these programs are brought forward, so all the questions are answered in a fashion. But I really commend the people involved in this program, because I really feel that this is cutting edge and this is what our students want. And I hate to see this be delayed. And I do see your point that maybe we add a few more requirements to what is required of the process. But I hate to see this delayed too much longer. And I agree with the comments of the Chancellor that the presidents have their budgets and they need to play within the confines. And if they're doing that, then we should be all set to proceed. Maybe it should be just an edit on what we require coming forward for new programs. So just my thoughts.
Other questions? I'm scrolling between screens here, so I'm sorry I missed you, Trustee Martin. Ellen, finally, will you take the roll, please?
Certainly. Trustee Alexander.
Yes.
Trustee Dobson.
Yes.
Trustee Ames.
Yes.
Trustee McMahon.
Yes.
Trustee Martin.
Yes.
Trustee Riley.
Yes.
Trustee Singelgren.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you. The next agenda item is a unified accreditation update. Jeff.
Thank you, Trustee McMahon. I think this one can be done pretty briefly. Per NECHI's process, as the trustees have heard from me before, our response to the evaluation team's report has come in two parts. We first filed a fact check response to the draft version of that report, followed by a substantive response where we address any differences of interpretation with the final version of the NECHI report. We received the draft report on November 15 and submitted a fact check response 2 weeks later. Most of our corrections focused on characterizations of the Unified Catalog Initiative, including references to common catalog or single catalog throughout. And we politely asked for Unified Catalog to be the preferred descriptor. And then a few minor errors regarding assessment. We received the final report in December. We shared it the following day with the trustees, the presidents, vice chancellors, faculty governance council chair, faculty senate and assembly presidents, and then a few days after that with the entire UMS community in a system-wide message from the chancellor. We are submitting our substantive response, that second half of our response, to the team's final report either today or tomorrow. We've responded principally in a couple of areas, including the team's characterization of the Faculty Governance Council. As Jamie Morera noted earlier on this call, they didn't have the advantage of seeing the recently finalized and ratified charter and charge of the Faculty Governance Council during their visit, and they completed their report just before I received that charter and charge. So in our response, we were able very helpfully to say, here is the thoughtful work that our faculty have done over the last 2 years to develop those materials. And we were able to respond to some concerns that the team expressed in its report on that basis. We also importantly addressed an element that the team left out of its report altogether, which was our request for general approval to offer competency-based education courses at the University of Maine at Presque Isle. When the commission first granted unified accreditation in July of 2020, they invited us to invite them in our self-study and through this process to grant us that general approval, so that President Rice doesn't have to write a report to NECHI every time he wants to add a new program in CBE. The team didn't respond to that in our self-study or anywhere in their report, so we inserted it upon advice from NECHI Commission staff into our substantive response, and we expect NECHI action on that after they've considered our response. Chancellor Malloy, Vice Chancellor Dorsey, and I will meet with the full NECHI Commission outside of Boston on Thursday, March 2. It will be a 60-minute discussion of the self-study, the evaluation visit, the team's final report, and our substantive response to that report. The commission will then send a letter to the Chancellor and to Chair Riley, summarizing its findings and sharing guidance in areas where follow-up or improvement are needed. That letter could come as early as 3 or 4 weeks later or a couple of months later. It really depends on the volume of correspondence the commission staff are handling at any one point in the semester. And I'll close before inviting any questions by saying once again that the commission's final letter, or what it calls an action letter, could come in several different forms. They could say, thank you. We don't need to hear from you again until your 5th year report 5 years from now. They could say, thank you, we want to hear more from you in 2 years on this topic, or in 1 year on this topic. They could also follow up with what's called a focused evaluation and say, we want to send a person or 2 people a year from now to speak with you and get a report from you on this particular topic, where we want to make sure improvements are made. All of those would be considered successful outcomes to this process. The commission simply has many different ways that it follows up with its constituent universities and systems. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of you may have.
Questions, Vice Chancellor St. John?
Chair Riley, please.
Thanks. I wonder, Jeff, one of the things in reading the NECHI report, and maybe it was just my eyes, but it seemed on several occasions they went further than we go in sort of pushing the uniformity envelope and the homogenization of campuses, and didn't adequately identify the different missions of each campus. Now, maybe I was the only one who read it that way. I think the Chancellor had some concerns. Will we clarify that in our response, our substantive response?
We did, in a respectful and diplomatic way. We did push back on that. I got some very helpful feedback on that from the Chancellor. I also got some very thoughtful feedback from President Farini-Mundi and other presidents. We did push back, Chair Riley. I think I may have mentioned this at a board meeting, and certainly I mentioned it at Chancellor's Council before. The role of the visiting team is to identify areas of strength and areas of improvement. It is not their role to tell us how to use unified accreditation as granted to us by the commission. And I think in a number of areas of our response, even in the fact check, but here also in the substantive response, we made that clear. So thank you.
Great, thanks.
Other questions? Seeing none, the next topic will be the Chief Academic Officer's update. And again, Vice Chancellor St. John.
Thank you, Trustee McMahon. Trustee McMahon invited an update from each of our CAOs. I think I see all but one of them on the screen or on the two screens here today, specifically with respect to retention efforts on their campuses. And also he asked an additional question about UMaine, any bump in retention or increase in that regard since the conferral of the R1 designation. So Provost Ballin, I know, has come prepared to speak to that. But since he always likes to go first, in fact, insists on going first, I'll start with President Provost Zakis and ask him to kick us off.
I'm going to just say thank you to that opportunity. So good morning, folks. So let me just say, just enrollment in general, I think starts us off with kind of a couple things. One is that we, in good news stories, we graduated a large graduating class last May. And because of that, we are about 90 students shorter this year than we were last year at this time. Basically, we are down about 1,300 credits. Basically, there are, with that is some good, good slivers of enrollment opportunities. I think when we view our kind of diversity enrollment strategies that we work on, continuing is down, as we mentioned, but new admits are up, transfers are up, graduates are up, early college is up. So a lot of opportunities for us to kind of erode into that. Continuing is obviously, I think to Trustee McMahon's point, the continuing students is the big driver for us. About 80% of our credits come from the continuing. We're leveraging the system resource of EAB. So we have campaigns for every academic program. We're sending out emails to all students who have not registered yet. That's about 600 or so. We also have the 490 of those 600 or so have no hold. So those are the ones we're targeting with phone campaigns as well. As we also know that early college does come later in the game. So we expect probably about half of our early college credits to still come by the February 15th thing. The transfers being up, we think are also tied with our marketing strategies as well. So we're happy about that. And also just that the majority of our students are non-traditionals as well. So they always seem to register late. And so we kind of expect the last week, our peak watermark generally comes just the week once the semester starts. So we usually expect about 2,000 to 3,000 more credits during this period. So the bottom line is that we are on track for our FY23 adjusted credit hours of just over 28,000 credits. I'm happy to take any questions if we need to. Thank you.
Any questions for President Provost Zakis? Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Then I'll turn to the Chief Academic Officer of the Maine Law School, Dimitri Baum.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeff. Well, thank you for having me here. Retention hasn't historically been an issue at the law school. One reason is we have an older student body. Many of them kind of give up their careers. They put their lives on hold to come to law school. They're really thoughtful about why they're coming to law school. So they're here for a good reason. Part of it is also the admissions process. It's a small student body. Carrie Wilshusen, our Dean of Admissions, does an amazing job getting to know all the students really well. She talks to all the students about why they're coming to law school, what they're looking for. So all the faculty and the staff really know everybody at the law school, have a sense of why they're here, what they're looking for in their career, and stays connected with them throughout their whole time here. We don't have the kind of dismissal culture. For those of you who watch Paper Chase, there's that famous line, look to your left, look to your right, one of you won't be here. We've never had that. So typically in an average year, we might lose one student to transfer, and maybe one or two students to academic dismissal, academic attrition. But that's about the extent of the students that we end up losing from year to year. And for students that have struggled or struggled during their first semester, first year, we have a fairly robust academic success program. We have an academic success director, Greg Bordelon, who works with students on supporting them in their second and third year to make sure they're staying on track, to make sure they're kind of getting the information they need, the skills they need to succeed in law school and ultimately pass the bar exam. And we have a pretty robust advising program as well. So the faculty, in fact, the students are required to meet with their faculty advisor at least once a semester before registration. So I meet with all of my advisees. We talk about their career plans. We talk about staying on track for graduation. We have a lot of career services support for every student. So it's some of the kind of benefits of being a small law school is we're kind of selective in who we bring in. We want to make sure we bring in folks who will do well in law school, who'll pass the bar, who'll be strong members of the main bar. And that has really helped us retain the students that have come here, where we really have almost no losses from semester to semester or year to year. And I'm too happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Provost Baum, who looks like he's standing in his gleaming new office at 300 4th Street?
And at a standing desk, which is apparently healthier for me. Well, I'm getting tired.
Dimitri, thank you very much. I'll turn next to our provost at the University of Southern Maine, Adam Tuchinski.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to the board for bringing this. I think this is the most important subject that the University of Maine system faces, and I think we should all have our feet held to the fire on this issue. So just a couple of quick things on our initiatives. You know, we hired an enrollment manager this summer, and we added retention to the title. And then initially what we've done this year is, I think we're going from laggards to leaders in the system, thanks to Provost Ballin and Brian Olson and some staff at Farmington and Augusta. We're joining robustly the UMS Transforms program, in particular, research learning experiences, career learning, and also learning support. We view these primarily through the lens of academic excellence, and hopefully they also have a retention benefit as well. We also have joined into and gotten help from the system on EAB Navigate, and we've seen some really good, I don't think there's any magic bullets in the realm of retention, but we did find that students who did receive a notification or an update, academic update from their faculty retained from fall to spring at 75%, versus students who did not receive an academic update from their faculty member retained at 48%. We also have some great existing programs that I know the president has at the top of her agenda. They tend to be expensive and philanthropically funded, but our Promise Scholar program actually had first to second year retention above 90%. And this is a vulnerable student population. More generally, and most importantly, I think working with Megan Arena, we are developing a standing committee on retention, persistence, and graduation. Too often we've approached these problems throwing spaghetti against the wall. And rather than doing a process of continual improvement, because retention rates across the system are abominable. We reached highs at the 70% level prior to COVID. We dropped to the lower 60% after COVID. This year, we have modestly good news of coming up to 68% first to second year retention. And that's close to what our peer institutions in New England have. But where we see real issues is less in first to second year retention and more in the realm of graduation rates, where a school like Keene State has similar first to second year retention, but they graduate students in the 50s or 60% 6-year retention, where we are down in the mid 30s. So the most important thing about our standing committee is and I own it as an administrator myself, is we instantly jump into programs that are based upon national best practices, but we have an institutional research office which is collecting a lot of data, which isn't well utilized, which is why I think human-centered design programs are so important, because we need to actually access, visualize, and as a whole community understand our data. And if you do have some time, I could share some of the data that we've been collecting initially, because we actually want to work rather than from best practice, but work from our data. And so a couple of things that our data subcommittee has surfaced this year is that over the last 7 years, 6,000 students have left USM and enrolled at another institution. There is some good news there. Close to 1,000 enrolled in another UMS school, which I consider a success. 1,500 enrolled at a Maine community college, but 3,000 went out of state. We have found that double majors retain at 80%, and athletes and students in the arts that have robust experiential learning also retain at a high rate. But finally, what's been most surprising is the post-COVID environment. For the first time, we're seeing men retain at a higher rate than women. And we've seen an overall loss in enrollment from women, which I think some of our faculty have pointed out in some of our open meetings on the subject, that women students are behaving similarly to women workers who are leaving the workforce post-COVID, and that's something we have to address. The other surprising thing post-COVID is that our multicultural students are actually retaining at a higher rate than our white students. But most importantly, what we're trying to do by our goal for the end of the year is to have a standing committee on retention, persistence, and graduation. And we're going to produce a strategic plan that's focused upon communities of students that we're losing, and also universalizing best practices in teaching, making sure we brand those practices and then reward those practices in faculty review. And so, I think the system has helped us a great deal with some of initiatives like EAB and also with the UMS Transforms, but we're also trying to understand the issue at a local level, and it's the top priority. Without anything, number two is distant second. So thank you, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer any. Thank you.
Any questions for Provost Tuchinski? And if not, I'll turn to Kathy Yardley, Provost at the University of Maine at Farmington.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for giving me a chance to talk about retention efforts at the University of Maine at Farmington. So this spring, we anticipate that our expected return rate will be 91.1%, which is consistent over the past 8 years. And UMF's retention efforts are aligned to address 3 major sources of attrition: academic difficulties, challenges in resolving educational and occupational goals, and failure to become academically and socially connected. And for our students, academic difficulties are often impacted by financial challenges and mental health challenges. So this year, we've not only incorporated a number of new initiatives, which I'll speak about, but we've also looked at the structural organization of how we support student success. So student affairs and enrollment management and advising have been reorganized to support student success. So oversight of career services was shifted to the director of advising so that conversations related to career options and opportunities become a natural extension of advising. In addition, our Assistant Dean of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment now has oversight of the Student Learning Commons, which provides academic supports to our undergraduate students, and academic appeals. And all of these new responsibilities perfectly align with her other responsibilities in teaching and learning. So I'll now share with you some of the new initiatives that we've incorporated this past year, and we anticipate seeing great success with these. We've worked to revise the suspension process to make sure that it's more accessible to students. They have different options for appealing. There are more plentiful communications with students. We've also encouraged and expanded the number of faculty working with instructional designers. One of the things that we have learned since COVID is that students really need to have very clear expectations laid out for them. And so the instructional designers helping faculty with that, as well as providing constructive, meaningful, and timely feedback. Other initiatives include expanding peer advising on campus. There is going to be a new peer coaching program implemented this spring as a pilot. We've expanded the hours in our Student Learning Commons, and we've also embedded tutors in classes that are considered high risk for students. We've increased mental health and wellness and clinical outreach capacity. So we've increased the number of counselors, emergency funds for counseling and medical care for students who are uninsured or underinsured. Faculty are using the Navigate Quick survey model. So they're checking in with students who do not come to class the first week, just to make sure we can catch them early and have conversations with them and put them right on track. We've added a skills lab component to one of the first year seminars to pilot that, to see if we can help students be more successful and develop skills early on in their career. This will be expanded next year. There's going to be at least 3 or 4 first year seminars that will incorporate the skills lab. We've added student life membership to the academic success team. We've retooled 3 different student-facing staff positions to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've added first-year fusion classes, which are classes offered before the start of the semester. So students start their first-year seminar with a tight community and off-campus activities. And then hopefully that community serves to support one another once they are active in their academics. And we've also added research learning experiences to their first year seminars. We have a variety of new opportunities that we're going to implement in the fall, but that's what we're doing currently right now, and look forward to great success.
Kathy, thank you so much. Any questions for Provost Yardley? Well, I'll turn then to Provost Mullen. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jeff, and hello everyone again. When we look at overall numbers of our overall degree-seeking undergraduate retention, is actually up 1% over last year. So it's at 87% versus the 86%. The largest gain actually was among our sophomores with a 2 percentage point increase. The retention for our first-year students, I would say, is flat. It's about 85% and was 84.3% last year. So it's very, very close. The retention for our degree-seeking graduate students is up about 2%. So our degree-seeking graduate students is at 81% compared to 79 last year. If we look at retention numbers for University of Maine at Machias, they're up 2%. So they're 73% versus 71% last year. But their first year retention is up almost 3%. So they're at 77% versus 74% last year. We know, so I'm just going to be talking about really a lot of the retention initiatives that are fairly new, not going through the whole list, but we know that students leave for 3 major reasons: financial reasons, academic performance, or sometimes the match would be, academic match would be there, and then a personal connection, that support, that sense of belonging, that sense of community. And so when we look at a lot of the different things that were done for retention and are currently being done, they touch on those areas. One thing that we just did is we relaunched the Make the Grade initiative that the Chancellor had initiated about 3 years ago during the pandemic. And this is for all first-year students at the University of Maine and the University of Maine at Machias who received 1F grade during their fall 22 semester. As Adam discussed a little bit, the UMS Transforms, we recently launched Gateways to Success. Gateways to Success is one of the 3 student success retention initiatives. Proposals have been submitted by all 7 universities. They've been approved for funding. And the idea is to decrease the DFWL rates in those courses that hold the most first and second year students back in their college progress. The proposed activities for this will actually begin in 2023. And that will really greatly increase the use of what we call Maine Learning Assistants and other peer mentor approaches. Those peer mentor approaches not only help those students that are being mentored, but the mentees actually get a lot of agency with this. And data shows that their retention rate is actually much higher. So these are like a suite of high impact teaching practices that we are doing. Several units across both the University of Maine and University of Maine Machias are leveraging EAB Navigate that you heard a few folks talk about. This improves student persistence through those personalized updates. I will say we have a new associate provost for student success starting in February, and he's an expert in this area. And so we're hoping to really ramp that back up in 2023 and get more of the university truly incorporating the Navigate app. Universities that really have dove into it have shown that it actually really helps. We have the University of Maine Business School, the College of Education and Human Development, and the Honors College have all either added new or reconfigured existing administrative staff that are dedicated to first year advising or retention. We know that of students that we won't retain, we lose fully 2/3 of them in that first year, 80% of them within the first 2 years. So we're really trying to, obviously focus on that. Interestingly, it'll be fun to watch interesting to assess. The Maine Business School is piloting a new peer tutoring platform called NAC. And this is a platform that will connect Maine business students that have done well in a course with students that are enrolled in the same course. And they're going to start that this coming spring. And we're going to assess it to see if this is something that we might want to consider moving across the whole university. Essentially, that platform allows for remote and in-person peer tutoring by partnering these UMaine students with one another. In addition, to the previous point, we are having more first-year success courses that are being implemented across the colleges and units to prepare students for college life. You heard a few times already. We have 54 research learning experience course sections planned for fall 2023. These research learning experience courses are for first-year students. They have a bridge component, usually a bridge week component tied to them that really helps those students develop that sense of community, that sense of belonging, right even before they start. Last year we had 18% of our first-year students. The previous year we had around 10%. So we're hoping to even increase that as this becomes more widely known among students that are applying to the university. All colleges at the University of Maine and the University of Maine at Machias are right now actively working on unenrolled students to get them registered for spring 23 or to make a plan to return. That's something that the colleges have really taken under their wing in the last few years, and we tend to make really great progress with that. So I think I'll end there and certainly open to any questions. Thanks. And sorry for the noise in the background. That is the construction that's happening. So.
Chair Riley?
Thanks. I just have a curious question. How big is the honors program, and does honors have a better retention success story than the rest of the university?
Well, like a lot of honors programs, these are your high-performing students coming in. Overall, those students do have a greater retention at the end. We have we'll enter about a little over 350 students in the honors program. They don't have good retention in the honors program, actually fairly much lower than the national standards, but we don't lose those students. We hired a new dean a year and a half ago. She's working on that. And there are some obstacles on the thesis aspects and committee aspects that they have made really great improvements on. And so I think we'll start seeing where students are retained in the honors program, but those students that enter honors have a much higher retention rate.
And thank you, Adam, for your chat.
I don't see President Hedin, so I think President Rice, you get to wrap us up.
Well, thank you very much. I'll give you a couple of facts and figures and then talk a little bit about our specific strategies for increasing retention and graduation rates. We're just over 1,000 students enrolled this spring, which is a 5% increase from last spring. Our credit hour is a little over 10,600, which is also almost a 5% increase. That is reflective of the increase from the fall semester, which we saw healthy increases in both headcount and credit hour generation. The majority of which those all of the increases are accountable for the competency education program, Your Pace program increases, which actually grew over 50% since the start of the pandemic through to this past fall and now into this spring. The really interesting percentage we see in terms of completion rates in the Your Pace program, which for students that actually start the competency modules, and not every student that enrolls by the nature of these students, because these are adult learners, degree completion students all across the country. So not every student that starts in the program or indicates that they're going to begin the program actually starts competency modules, but those that do, 87% complete their modules, which has led to a very strong increase in our number of graduates this past year. And again, we saw 25% more graduates this past graduation than we did in 2021. And that was because of our sharp increase in adult learners through the EuroPace program. So those metrics continue to be very strong metrics. In some ways, those students are persisting much stronger than our first-time full-time students. And the average learner in the EuroPace program completes in under 2 years. Most of those students that do complete the degree, and again, there's a large number of students that don't complete the degree because they move on to a different program, but they finish within 18 months. In terms of our more traditional students, we crested just before the pandemic at about 70% of fall to fall. That dropped to just about 59%, and we're looking at an uptick. So we had spent several years on our initiatives, including through the EAB Navigate, which we used extensively with 4 check-in periods over the course of the semester with faculty that would give direct input, and then the various efforts we would use both through our Title III funded programs to address those students' needs. But we did see an impact, particularly on our resident students or online traditional aid students during the pandemic. So that's where we have a lot of our efforts right now, focused around we have a executive director of admissions and enrollment management who has been working very closely with our former dean of enrollment management that worked both for UMPI and UMFK, but we can continue to contract with him for the past 2 years, and he's been working directly with Sue White, who is now our executive director of enrollment management. She oversees our student success council, and that is comprised both of work that is done through our Student Support Services Title III grant and a specific Strengthening Universities Title III grant that allowed us to employ a director of university experience that has revised our first-year programming, and that includes connections with RLEs that Provost Volin mentioned before, as well as the gateways. So we have a lot of interconnections between those initiatives and our own initiative through the Strengthening Universities grant and the full-time director we have there. So those, that's reflects a lot of the work we've done coming out of the pandemic. But again, I just wanted to underscore, we are exceptionally pleased about the success of our adult learners in the competency-based programming.
Any questions for President Rice? Trustee McMahon, I think that wraps up the updates from the CAOs. Oh, Trustee Alexander, please.
I was impressed with a lot of what I heard. Is there any valid data that would distinguish retention between those who come into a university and enroll and live in a dorm versus those who don't? And the other distinction I would love to know is whether there's a difference between courses taught by Zoom or versus those taught in person. And I don't know if it's that sort of thing is capable of being tracked, but in terms of collegiality, it just seems like there should be or could be a higher retention rate with in-person and dorm-based experiences in college. But again, I have no knowledge to back that up. Wondered if data is being collected. Somebody is looking at that. I see that.
It looks like 2 of our provosts would like to weigh in on that. So I'll start with Ray and then go to Adam.
Sorry, the quick answer to that, trustee, is yes. We do have very specific data on that. For instance, our residence hall students persist at a higher rate than non-residence hall students or students that do not come to campus when they're first-time full-time students. Athletes persist even higher as a subset of those residence hall students. Athletes are our best persisting students that are on campus. And then again, we view it as our competency-based students are a third demographic that are separate from those first-time, full-time sets of demographics.
Yeah, and I would just echo Ray. Our residential students retain first to second year 15% higher. We do collect data on online, and I don't know if the president would want to weigh in. We've been reviewing that data. I think what makes it hard is we have a lot of residential students who take a smattering of online classes. And then we have some students who are fully online. And so I'm not too convinced of the reliability of data. One of the kind of leading retention programs we have is there used to about 20% of our online faculty are utilizing Accu, which is a best practices in online. And so what we're trying to figure out is how to make online convenient, particularly for working parents, by emphasizing asynchronous coursework, but also trying to ensure that students have the same kind of rich relational experience, I think, that Kathy and John were talking about. And so that's kind of the biggest challenge online. Those classes always enroll first, and how much we want a first-year student sitting in a dormitory taking an online class, I think, is one of the biggest dilemmas that we face as an institution. But we need to kind of dig in more on that question. So I think it's a great question, Trustee Alexander.
John, please.
So I won't reiterate what everyone else has said, but it is very similar. Our first year students actually have to live on campus, and so that pulling that data out is not as easy since the vast majority are on campus. But our student athletes also have the highest retention as well, just like Umpy was talking about.
Thank you all. Trustee McMahon, I think that may wrap up this portion of the agenda.
So the final item on the agenda is 22-23 demographics, enrollment and trends update. And I believe that is you again.
Thank you. And I will, Trustee McMahon, with your indulgence, I'll focus today primarily on demographics and trends and offer to bring back a fuller enrollment report in March. We'll have better data on spring 2023 enrollment, end of February, our next ASA meeting. We'll have better data on spring 2023 at that time. And also, I just got passed a note saying that our online data platform, Tableau, is running slowly today. So the magic that Jamie Ballinger would have worked with the screen would be less impressive and more time consuming at the end of this meeting. If that works for you, I'll come back in February and provide an enrollment update.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So demographics, then I'll start there. I've drawn from a wide variety of sources, some of which are very well known to all of you: Census, National Clearinghouse, American Community Survey Project, Maine Department of Education, Educate Maine, and also a piece that Provost Vollen published in the Hechinger report last fall. So I'll credit him for his help with this. Maine continues to have very challenging demographics. As of the end of 2021, Maine was continued to be the oldest state in the U.S. with an average age of 45.0. That's followed closely by New Hampshire, 43.1, and Vermont at 43. Connecticut and Rhode Island are also north of 40, and Massachusetts is just under that number at 39.7. By contrast, the average Texan is 35.2 years old. Residents of Washington, D.C., 34.4, and residents of Utah, 31.5. As a whole, the Northeast is the oldest region in the country, and Northern New England is the oldest part of that region. In terms of population, there is some brighter news. Maine grew in population by more than 10,000 residents in 2021 and added another 8,000 net gain in 2022. In total, from the onset of COVID in Maine, roughly March 2020, through the end of 2022, Maine added nearly 22,000 residents. By population, Maine ranks 42nd among the 50 states and has, with 1.37 million residents, Maine has the third lowest birth rate in the nation. In terms of composition in Maine, 13 of Maine's 16 counties continue to be more than 90% white. Cumberland, Androscoggin, and Washington counties are just below that 90% threshold in terms of diversity. College participation and persistence, I think as many of you already know, Maine sees a historically high percentage of secondary school students graduate. 94% is the most commonly cited source. Since the onset of COVID, however, the percentage of Maine high school students who enroll in higher education in the fall semester following their high school graduation has dropped from 62 to 54%, with somewhere between 13 and 14,000 high school graduates a year. Statewide, that 8% drop is significant all the way down the line for our enrollments. Of students in Maine who go on to college, persistence rates, as Provost Tuchinski noted, are not strong. For the fall 2019 cohort, about 63% of students at Maine's 2-year and 4-year institutions persisted to the fall of their second year, and 64% of those students overall graduated within 6 years. About 53% of Mainers aged 25 to 64 have a post-secondary degree or credential. So if you compare that figure with the inverse of our persistence and graduation percentages, there's a sizable population of working age Maine adults who have some number of college credits, but no degree or credential. In terms of trends, I'll just end briefly with this. This is very consistent with some of what you heard today. I would say the most surprising trend, and certainly one that would not have been on my list prior to COVID, in the national discussion, is what I would call connection and well-being. You heard that from several of our provosts today and in various contexts. Examples here: research learning experiences, other co-curricular activities, clubs, organizations, living in a dorm, making one friend your first week or 2 weeks of college. Indispensable and pivotal in terms of helping students find a home for themselves and persist fall to spring in their first year, and critically spring to fall going from the end of their first year to their second year. I think we continue to work on connection and well-being in a number of contexts and look forward to hearing more about that work as we move forward. And then secondly, I would class this under the general heading of what some have called conversion resources. We are increasingly looking at helping to convert a higher percentage of early college students as matriculants to our universities, helping to convert a higher percentage of Maine community college students as matriculants to our universities, and in our broader enrollment funnel, and then in general transfer as well. The consequence for even a 1 or 2 or 3% increase in one or more of those areas for each of our institutions is huge. It's truly transformative in terms of budget, in terms of overall institutional health, in terms of program viability, capacity to hire additional faculty lines, everything. So we are looking more and more closely at that, speaking with the enrollment managers, speaking regularly with the provosts. Anticipate bringing forward later this spring some specific recommendations around those conversion activities in a couple of areas for this committee's and the full board's consideration. And Trustee McMahon, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. Chair Riley?
Really a lot of information, good information. Could you go back, Jeff, to the fewer high school graduates are going on to higher ed of any kind? What year was that? Does that reflect the free community college?
In total, it reflects the COVID period.
The COVID period, okay.
Yes, so 8% drop across the COVID period. Yes.
So we'd expect that to go higher, particularly with the free community college in later years.
I think we would, and I noted it not to depress anyone, but only to note that given the comparatively small number of high school graduates in Maine versus Connecticut or Massachusetts or elsewhere, every one of those students counts, and that dip is precipitous for our state.
Right.
I would also note that the historic data with respect to percentage of students going on to college has been in existence for a very, very long time. It was impacted by COVID, but the trend itself is a very high school graduation rate and a relatively low direct to college rate.
Trustee Alexander?
So my only comment is I would love to find a way to link the long-term goal and objectives that this data demands that we respond to into the strategic planning process.
I may be able to play a role in that regard, Trustee Alexander. I look forward to doing so.
Any other questions of Jeff? It's a shame that we end on a rather down note. It is a nice day out there, but I do appreciate the full and frank discussion. I think we've had a very good discussion. And if there are no other questions or concerns, I would declare the meeting